Hello again. So this is for our first discussion post, which is from Unit 1A. For this, I'll be reviewing two different topics. We'll start with the first one, which is writing research papers. I do have experience in writing research papers myself. I haven't done that many by myself. I usually have done it with a team. That is something I've really found important, though, when it is done with a team, is that it's important to realize that everyone plays a role. It's not just one person being in charge and distributing it even. It's everyone needs to work like a well-oiled machine, essentially. And I find it really important to understand that there are strengths and there are weaknesses in people when it comes to writing these. And when you're doing them yourself without those additional aids, essentially, it's also important to understand that it's okay to ask for help, just as Dr. Hendricks mentioned about making sure you are going back and looking at, say, a manual on how to even write, because that might not be your strongest suit. It's really important just to make sure that you stay calm about it and understand that there's no shame in going back and getting help. And my next point kind of also ties into the second topic of preparing research projects. It's important that one of the first things you start doing when beginning your research projects is making sure you have very sound sources from the get-go and then building off of those as you continue on in your project. And when you're doing research projects by yourself, those essentially can become like your team, essentially. These people have done their part of the research, so now it's your turn to take the reins and do your project. Another essential thing to do when you're preparing for your research project is to understand how each section is going to work. So when I wrote my very first one ever and I had to do a lit review, I had no idea what that meant. And I had to go look up previously done research projects, and these weren't even over the topic I was having to research at the time. They were just by people that I knew what they were talking about. And I had that reference to go back and make sure I was able to structure it the way it needs to be, make sure it's sound, and make sure that whenever my reader was reading it, they understood it. It's kind of like how Dr. Hendricks said, you need to avoid jargon, assume that you're smarter, everyone's as smart as you are about the topic. You need to make sure that you're writing it so that almost anyone can understand that. And making sure I had those examples and I was able to reference back to something when I just didn't understand quite how it needed to be formatted was really essential whenever I've done my own projects. And then for the overall experience of writing any type of research project, whether you're starting to prepare it or you're in the middle of writing it, one of the most important things I found is that you've got to stay organized because you're not writing this in a day. This is going to be taking several weeks. Some people even take several months depending on what the topic's over. And so it's really essential to make sure you are staying organized and know where you're getting everything from so that whenever it's time to reference back to that, you can be able to find that source like that. One thing I've always had to do to make sure I remembered where I got everything was no matter what I read, if I had a source that I was going to be using anything for, I'd put them in a separate document that was easy to access. And I saved that document, but I also would create what I have are sticky notes on my desktop so that I always had something to reference back to and I knew where I could pick up from. I put them in the order that I found them in because that's the best way for me to remember. And that was one of the number one things that I had to learn by trial and error because I would put something or reference someone's name and tell myself I'll leave the tab open. And then I don't work on it for a few days or I work on a different part for a few days later and suddenly I don't remember why this tab's open and I delete it and then I have no idea where I got the information. So it is very important to stay organized and make sure everything is in one central location so that we don't have those problems when it comes later on down the road and you know where you had all your information found. I've enjoyed being able to work in a team setting of writing research projects. When I've done them by myself, I feel a little bit overwhelmed, so I have to really focus on, like I said, staying organized. But I am interested to see what everyone else has said about this because I think it's really cool how everyone has their own niche when it comes to these big projects like this. So yeah.